It'll be a good thing for us all if I set my stopwatch to start now. I want to thank this Synod for inviting a few of us from the New South Wales and ACT Synod to come and spend some time together. So General Secretary, thank you. Moderator, we thank you. Jenny, in particular you and the Mission Resource Team, we thank you for the invitation to come and to talk together, to wrestle together. And we come as fellow pilgrims. We don't come as experts. We certainly don't come as experts. We don't come with neatly packaged answers or strategies or 10-point plans for renewal. We come just as wondering and bewildered as we all are with what God is up to in the Uniting Church at the moment. But we come with curiosity and wonder and hope. We come with a heart for conversation, for shared stories, for praying together, and for wrestling together what it means to be the Uniting Church, this small expression of God's church in this world at this time, and how we might join God's mission at this time in that unfolding story. And the theme that we landed to kick off our time together is this: sacred disruption, joining the Spirit in the renewal of the church. There we go. It's broadly accepted amongst leaders within the church that we are in a period of significant change and disruption, and in many places decline in the church in the Western world. And this is particularly true of the Uniting Church in Australia. This graph shows the percentage growth or decline of weekly attendance of many of the main denominations in Australia from 2001 to 2024. Some denominations have grown, some have stayed steady, and some have declined. And it's a pretty good reality check that the Uniting Church is kind of right at the end. The Salvation Army is actually kind of just off that graph, but I've left them up there. But for transparency, they are one step closer. The Salvos are the largest percentage decline, but the Uniting Church is next. And I don't want to get into debates of transfer growth or how these stats work. I get that these are very one-dimensional, but it's pretty sobering. The United Church has declined dramatically. And when data's flattened like this, I get it. We miss a lot. We miss all the beautiful expressions of the kingdom that are still taking place in and through the Uniting Church. And so this is not meant to discourage us, for God is still wonderfully at work in the Uniting Church. But it is meant to be provocative, to provoke us to prayerfully consider how God might be wanting to disrupt us and unsettle us at this time. Because whilst we might want to sometimes kind of hide that, this is just the whole church is in decline, this graph shows us that the Uniting Church in particular has something that we need to wrestle with. And so what do we do with this? Surely our response can't be based out of fear or out of anxiety or some kind of need to save the church or institutional survival, for these things do not bring life. But how might we seek to join the Spirit in the renewal of the Uniting Church? And so as I've kind of thought about this time and what I feel is on my heart to bring, I've settled on three things: a reminder, a metaphor, and an invitation. Firstly, a reminder. Jeff Thompson writes the following in his short commentary on the basis of union. The vision of faith sketched out in the Uniting Church's basis of union might have something particular, unique, encouraging, and even constructively unsettling to say to the contemporary church. And so as we come to explore this theme of sacred disruption and how we might join the Spirit in the renewal of the church, I want to suggest that the basis of union is a precious gift to us, something that can both unsettle and disrupt us, and that we can draw from, a deep well that we might reorient ourselves to who God is calling us to be as the Uniting Church at this time, a reminder of who we are and our identity. And so let's take a moment to just look briefly at some of the gold within the basis of union. But first, a small little exercise, really tiny exercise. I want each of you to think of one word or one phrase, if you can't keep it to a word, that describes the way of Jesus. We are called to be followers of the way. So what one word describes that way to you? One word or one phrase. Take a moment. I want to invite you to simply share that one word with the person next to you. It shouldn't take long because it's a word. So just take a moment and just share that one word with the person next to you. That sounds like a lot of words. I'll just draw us back together. So, this is not quite a trick question, but it kind of is. Here's what I'm wondering. Did anyone come up with this word? Strange. To be honest, given the same exercise, I wouldn't have settled on this word. This wouldn't have been the first thing that I go to. But here's the thing, whilst this is not necessarily our first thought about the way of Jesus, I love this, that the way of Jesus is strange. In his own strange way, Christ constitutes, rules and renews them as his church. This is one of my favourite phrases in the whole basis of union, and I love that you've already pointed to that tonight, Tim. Christ, in his own strange way, renews the church. What a statement. Firstly, what a gift. What a gift that we don't have to be responsible for this. The renewal of the church is not on us. We do not have to carry the weight and the responsibility of that. Like, that is liberating. I feel free reading that. The church is Christ's church, and he is the one who both forms the church by the Spirit and works to bring renewal. And we know this, but it is good to be reminded. And I need to be reminded of this. And then there's the way that Christ does this. Strange. Jesus cannot be pinned down. He is elusive, unpredictable. He is mystery. The Gospels highlight that even those closest to Jesus often failed to understand him. So what does it look like for the Uniting Church to be renewed in this time? Well, I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be a little strange. It will not be what we expect. It won't fit into our neatly crafted boxes and wonderful strategic plans or Synod proposals, as good as they are. But this little phrase should radically reshape the way that we live into being the church together, especially for those who have a leadership role in the church. It should shift us beyond our certainties and to a much more curious and open-handed posture. So may we be open to disruption, genuine disruption, as we join the Spirit, leading this strange, unexpected way of Christ. In terms of the call and identity of the church, the framers of the basis of union were absolutely clear that the church never exists as an end in itself. It only exists to join God's mission in the world, to be a fellowship of reconciliation and to be an instrument through which Christ may work and bear witness to himself. And so again, as we seek to discern how we might participate in this renewal, it has to be grounded in this fundamental understanding of the nature of the church. The church exists to pour itself out in love and service to the world, in the same radical self-giving love shown to us in Christ. The church must never define itself apart from the mission of Christ. Yet, I'm sure many of us have been in conversations where where the bias just shifts to how we can take better care of ourselves. And I get it, there's nuance and complexity in this. Please don't hear me saying we shouldn't be supporting our lay leaders and our ministers and our pastors and caring for each other. Absolutely we should. But when the emphasis shifts from building one another up in love in order to serve the world, to centering ourselves, centering church members as those that the church needs to be serving, we have lost our way. So if we're looking for sacred disruption, let's be absolutely vigilant in identifying this and calling this out and resisting any type of thinking that sees the church exist for itself. Again, the basis is absolutely oriented towards joining Christ's mission. Baptism, communion, scholarship, and ministry are all framed through the lens of mission. Baptism into Christ's body initiates people into Christ's life and mission in the world. We share together in the Lord's Supper in order that we might be strengthened for participation in the mission of Christ in the world. Our scholarly interpreters, through engagement with Scripture and contemporary thought, are to help the uniting church understand its own nature and its own mission in the world. And in relation to gifts and ministries, the church is to order its life in response to God's call to enter more fully into mission. And I'm sure you've read that often, but it is a cracking statement. I love this. The uniting church will order its life in response to God's call to enter more fully into mission. And this, working out what the heck it means to do that is the kind of sacred disruption that we need. That is the kind of thinking about how we might join in with what the Spirit is doing. And one little final comment just before we move on from the basis, because there's loads we could focus on here, but it's just a short reminder of what a gift it is, and that is unity. The writers of the Basis of Union clearly saw unity as a vital part of our witness. No doubt drawing on Christ's prayer for the church in John 17 and encouragement that the world would know Christ through the love that we have for each other. So in a time when the world is increasingly polarised, where public discourse is fractured, where we get stuck in echo chambers, the call to unity is not only important, it is prophetic. It is the church's call to be a sign, a living sign that God is actually in the business of reconciling and renewing all things. When we listen deeply across our differences, when we resist to divide along cultural or theological or generational lines, we embody something countercultural. We embody grace and we bear witness to the love and the joy and the wonder of God. So may we be a people known by our love and known by our unity. So the basis, what a gift. I am someone who journeyed into the uniting church from another denomination, and the basis has been something that I just think wow, this document is just incredible that this was written. And I can just imagine the people sitting around that room as they kind of came to the end of writing that and framing that, and it was ready to go out. And I just think what hope and possibility, the imagination that they had. I would have loved to have been in that room and to felt the Spirit really calling something new. And I want us to join in that same hope for the church, that those who kind of sat around that table, the room where it happened, and imagined what this uniting church could be. So that's the reminder. So now a metaphor. I'm really into nature documentaries, films, miniseries, kind of YouTube channels. I love them. I love, in particular, rewilding videos and regenerative agricultural videos. I might that sound really boring, but I love them. I love watching them. because I just think there is such great insight in them that speak to us about the ways of God. Thankfully, I'm not alone in this. There was this guy who used to go around talking about mustard seeds and vineyards and birds and fig trees. You may have heard some of his musings, and about the way that they reveal the kingdom. So let me share a little parable that I call the parable of the almond trees, and then we'll go on to speak more about a blended ecology in a moment. So here is a picture of almond trees in California. They look really pretty. They look beautiful. And they stretch out for thousands and thousands of acres. In fact, there are 1.5 million acres in California that look like this, almond trees. And as wonderful as they look, they are actually a picture of an unsustainable system. Every year, more resources need to be poured in to keep this sustainable. Every year the soil degrades a little more water is required, more chemicals, greater investment just to maintain the system, because monocultures like this are simply not natural and they're not healthy. And so to help address this challenge, the farmers have begun planting wildflowers in the middle of those rows. Wildflowers to bring a little bit of diversity back into the system, and soil health is improved, erosion is reduced, water retention in the soil is increased. And I was thinking, this is a cool little image for what the church can be. You've got kind of small, innovative expressions of Christian communities growing in the midst of an established orchard. And I shared this little image in a couple of settings. And one day I was telling my brother-in-law about this. He works kind of part-time on the land up on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. And he told me that apple farmers in Australia do a really similar thing. They plant wildflowers in between the rows of the orchards to attract the bees into the orchard. And I thought, that's a cool little addition to the story. And then as soon as he said that, he then laughed and he said, but then what they do is they go and they slash all those wildflowers in order to force the bees into the apple trees to pollinate the trees. And literally something in me just went wow, what a profound prophetic warning to the church about the way we deal with small, innovative expressions of communities. Unbelievable. Our fixation on the survival of the established church leads us so many times to crush the very thing that might actually bring life and health back to the system. And that image is just burnt in my mind now as a little parable, a little prophetic warning for the church. And so I want to play with this metaphor around ecology and a diverse, blended ecology when we think about the renewal of the church. Blended ecology is kind of the language and the framing we've been using in the New South Wales and the ACT. I first came across this term. This is not our term. I came across this term from an author called Michael Adam Beck, who's a United Methodist in the States, and he wrote that term. And the Fresh Expression movement in the UK have kind of been talking about a mixed economy, a diverse for quite a while. But I really love the point to nature and that natural image might speak to us. But first, just a tiny little side note on metaphors. There's the blended ecology. This is a little quote by Walter Brueggemann. Love Walter. He notes that a metaphor works by having an odd, playful, and ill-fitting match to its reality, the purpose of which is to illuminate and evoke dimensions of reality which would otherwise go unnoticed and therefore unexperienced. And so, in part I say this as a disclaimer. This is not a perfect metaphor. It doesn't fit perfectly. It's a little bit odd, it's a little bit playful, it doesn't quite match, but there's something in this that as we look at it, it helps us think about the church in a way that we might not have had. And it doesn't just shift our thinking, it shifts our posture just a little so that we might be able to embrace a more diverse, a more beautiful, and indeed a strange church. So here's the question. What might the concept of ecology, and in particular kind of a diverse blended ecology, have to offer us about our ecclesiology? And I've workshopped this question in a number of settings over the last couple of years, and I've kind of got a list of like 20 plus things, like 20 little illuminations that I think this offers us, that the blended ecology might speak to the church. Thankfully for you, I'm not going to go through all 20 odd tonight. I've kind of focused it down to 10. 10 insights that I think help shape and frame our thinking. And we're just going to kind of stay in the metaphor here. I'm not going to unpack these and kind of like, I'm not going to join the dots. That's kind of what a metaphor does. You join your own dots. You find your own meanings in this and figure it out as you go and see what the Spirit might be saying to you. But here are 10 little illuminations. The first, diversity as strength. The natural world teaches us that diversity is essential for vitality. Coral reefs flourish because of the sheer range of life within them. Rainforests thrive because of the interplay of countless trees and fungi and insects and birds and animals. Without diversity, ecosystems collapse. And the same is true of the church. Diversity in our worship, our witness, our service is absolutely key to the flourishing of the church and a sign of the Spirit's abundant creativity. Like, how crazy is it to think that one style of church, one model of church is going to meet the needs of our diverse communities? It's just ridiculous. And so the blended ecology affirms that varied expressions of church are not only kind of accepted, we don't just make room for them, we actually need them. They're necessary. So let's embrace diversity in our ecclesiology and encourage a rich tapestry of forms and expressions. Remember, the way could be strange. Celebrating diversity is only the beginning. In creation, nothing exists in isolation. Every tree, every stream, every creature belongs to a vast web of relationships. Life is sustained not by independence, but by interdependence. And we know this. But what's recently kind of blown my mind are these little things called mycelium networks. Hands up if you've heard of them, like you may have. Like, they are just, how cool are they? Like, they are incredible. I've only come across this in the last year or two. Like, where have these been all my life? Did you know that trees actually communicate with each other? They actually talk to each other. They share resources. They share nutrients. They share nitrogen and kind of, phosphorus and sugars and water shared across the system for the flourishing of the whole. And I just think, again, what a beautifully rich image for the church and who we should be. And they don't just share it across the same species of tree. They share it with different species. They actually communicate to each other. They even, I don't want to go off topic because I'll be here longer than I should be, but anyway, another day. But I love the theme of our current president, Carissa Sooley, has offered threads of love, weaving Christ's love across cultures and boundaries. Because the uniting church, we're already a tapestry of diversity. We already get this, but sometimes there's just a disconnection. And so rather than seeing our difference as something that, divides us, we absolutely should embrace this as rich and vital for us. So may we continue to embrace and grow networks of grace, recognizing how important they are for the fruitfulness of the church. Healthy ecosystems also depend on what is unseen, on the richness of the soil. And I said I love kind of rewilding, regenerative agricultural videos, and particularly ones from Australian farmers and how they are embracing ways of kind of regenerative farming. And one of the things that always comes through, is how important the soil is. Farmers are exploring all sorts of ways of attending to this, restoring natural creek lines, planting cover crops, rotating stock, all with the goal of improving soil health, which in turn kind of better helps the land to capture and hold water. It even prevents flooding in some instances, avoids erosion and increases resilience to drought. And I kind of thought about this metaphor. Naturally, it kind of leans to the inner life, that we need to be attending to the inner life. But I want to take it somewhere, like as critical as that is. We'll get to that later. But I think it's important to recognise just how vital a role our ground plays, our presbyteries and our synod play in the vitality and the health of the church. It's all about the forest, but our systems and our structures, if they're depleted, if they're hard, if they're eroded, they really have a huge impact on the flourishing of the whole. And so I think it's really important that when we think of what it might look like to create and to nurture a flourishing blended ecology, we have to have healthy presbyteries, we have to have healthy synods. We need that wonderful system, but we need that richness in which the forest can grow. For everything there is a season. Ecosystems are not static, they are dynamic, and one of the huge contributors to this dynamism, to this change, are seasons. So creation invites us to different ways of thinking and working and knowing through the season. Each season brings its own energy, its own cadence, its own potential for transformation. Each season carries its own wisdom. Wisdom about newness, about growth, about fullness, but also about letting go, and also about rest. Times of planting and pruning, harvest and dormancy. And recognising the rhythms of seasons help us kind of step away from things like burnout or for shame when things are slow. And I just really think that a more attentive kind of posture to what season we might be in a particular ministry or a particular church, or even our wider kind of system as the Uniting Church, might really help us not have unrealistic expectations that we need to be growing all the time. Growth looks different in different seasons. Related but different is the old nourishing the new. In creation, death and decay are not failure, but they are essential for regeneration. Fallen leaves decompose into humus, enriching the soil. Fallen trees provide habitat for fungi and insects, and together these cycles spark new life that renews the whole ecosystem. And the church is often anxious about endings. Yet when congregations, ministries or structures, even committees, are allowed to conclude with grace, their wisdom and resources are released to nourish new expressions of faith and mission. Like compost in the soil, what has been enriches what is to come. And this reframes decline. Endings are but part of the sacred rhythm of life, death and resurrection, where new life emerges not despite endings, but precisely because of them. We are, after all, a resurrection people, and to follow Christ is to trust that new life can spring from the ground of death. So rather than clinging on in fear, we are called to celebrate what has been, to lay it down with gratitude, and to wait in hope for the surprising new growth that God will bring. Nurturing intergenerational continuity. In healthy ecosystems, old and new, they grow together. Towering trees provide shade and nutrients that allow saplings to grow. In coral reefs, it's the older corals that form the base that new life actually attaches to. Generations sustain each other. So surely for the church to really flourish, we need to nurture connections between the generations. Elders carrying memory and wisdom, young people bringing energy and innovation, and intergenerational connectivity, reflecting God's call for a faith that is shared from generation to generation. whipping through these, hopefully. Small and hidden growth. So some of the most important growth that happens in an ecosystem, you hardly even see. It's almost invisible. We've already talked about mycelium, but the natural world is just filled with these small wonders that absolutely are essential to life. Plankton is invisible pretty much, but playing a super important role in sustaining healthy oceans. The rainforest floor is teeming with tiny micro life, absolutely important for the flourishing of the whole. The words of Mother Teresa, in this life we cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love. So the kingdom is like a mustard seed, God working in small hidden ways. And I think this too speaks to our thinking about the church. Small communities with great love are a beautiful and thriving part of the uniting church, and I think they hold a real power for renewal in our movement as a church. Again, adjacent to this is the unique role that margins and edges play within an environment. Ecologists note that the most fertile zones are often at the edges, where forests meet grassland, where river meets sea, like the great deltas of this world. And these ecotones, where two ecosystems meet, are rich in biodiversity. Mangrove swamps are a prime example of this. These edge zones between land and sea, like providing nurseries for countless fish, like countless birds, they play a unique role in the flourishing, not of just that little space, but the flourishing of the whole ecosystem around them. And so how do we embrace this as a church and discover vitality at the margins, at the edges, rather than being suspicious of kind of what's happening here at the edge of the church, but to value it and to learn from it? New expressions that are emerging from kind of disillusion, people who are disillusioned with traditional forms of church, or in kind of minority groups, those who are on the margins, and seeing where the Spirit might be stirring in those places. And that requires humility from the centre. It requires a listening posture about how the Spirit might be disrupting us by paying attention to what's happening at the margins. Scattered by the Spirit because we don't fully understand how God will use our faithful presence. Like think for a bit about the way seeds spread in the natural world. It's often in surprising ways. Dandelion seeds that are blown and they're taken far beyond the place where they grew. Mangrove seeds drifting to new coastlines, and birds eating seeds and taking them to places like well beyond where they dropped. And so this invites us towards an open-handed posture to mission. We don't always see the fruit of our work. We don't always know where words of grace, where faithful witness, where generous hospitality, where small acts with great love ultimately land. They are carried by the wind of the Spirit to unexpected places we will likely never see. But this reminds us that this is God's mission. This is not ours. And finally, paying attention to disequilibrium. You see, ecologists don't just study flourishing, they study imbalance. And just one example is this, where one kind of species just gets completely out of hand and destabilises the whole system. It chokes the life out of it. And so how do we recognise disequilibrium in the church? Where are we out of balance? Where are we over-centralised? Or where is there inequity in the way resources are shared across the life of the church? Where are voices being excluded, or where is governance stifling rather than encouraging mission? I think these are some of the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. Are we out of balance sometimes as a church? So there's just like a really quick thumbnail sketch. I think that I love this idea of the blended ecology. I think as we reflect on this, I think the Spirit can speak to us in genuinely profound and beautiful ways about who we can be and the posture that we might have. And so as we wrap up, I want to return to where we began, to the basis of union, and to one of the most well-worn phrases. We are a pilgrim people. And this idea is often used to kind of speak about the way that the church is invited to be on a journey and to be constantly kind of in renewal, constantly on a journey to a promised end. And it really is. It's a great phrase for that. But I want to invite a slightly different lens to this phrase just tonight. And I want us to ask this not of the church, but of ourselves. How open am I personally to being a pilgrim on the way? Is my inner posture that of a pilgrim, of being on road with Jesus towards transformation? Am I asking the Spirit to search me, to shape me, to lead me into new ways of seeing and being? Because if we want to talk about sacred disruption, we first need to be disrupted ourselves. If we personally are not encountering Christ, then we have little to offer to the church or to the world. Am I encountering Jesus? Am I open to the unraveling and the reweaving that Christ would do in me? Reweaving a more vibrant and beautiful faith, a faith absolutely grounded in love, and to be on the road with Christ, being transformed myself. I was even struck by that, and I hadn't noticed this before. This is the first time about that kind of the strange way that Christ renews the church and this little connection. Christ constitutes, rules and renews them as his church. So who's the them? Well, if you just go back a little bit further, it's talking about the disciples of a crucified Lord. So the renewal that Christ wants to do in the church is in who? It's in us. It's in the disciples. So I don't know where your mind goes when we talk about, let's talk about the renewal of the church. It might go to, we need to reform our synod or our presbyteries, or we need radical kind of change in our congregations. But where it should go, where this invites us to go, is to the renewal of ourselves, the renewal of disciples. Because if the thing we want to see is renewal in the uniting church, it's not going to come about by some brilliant strategy for how we organise ourselves. It's not going to come from some synod proposal. It's not going to come even some weird metaphor about a blended ecology. No, literally, the single greatest thing that will bring renewal in the uniting church is a growing collective of disciples who are personally being renewed in their faith, who are encountering the risen Jesus in meaningful and profound ways, disciples whose hearts burn with the flame of the Spirit and who embody the way of Christ in this world. Like that is the kind of sacred disruption that we should all be seeking. And so to that end, let me pray. God, we pray indeed that you would renew the church. And would you start by renewing us? Would you start by allowing your Spirit to unravel us and to reweave us into more beautiful ways of journeying with you, ways that genuinely see this world transformed through the love that you want to have shown to this world through us. And so I want to say I take a moment to kind of let go of all the things that I would love to see the church change in. And I genuinely want to pray that we would start to seek change within ourselves, that you would disrupt us by your Spirit and bring life and energy and renewal into your church. Amen.